Can you tell me a bit more about that time as a non-smoker when Eddie would come round to your house and just
Oh my God.
chimney smoke like
Smoking. So back in the day, let me just back up just a little bit, Nikos. Um, back in the day before they banned cigarette smoking everywhere, in California at least, and it wouldn't happen for years actually, but you can no longer smoke in restaurants or clubs, airplanes. Um, you could smoke anywhere. Um, so I would go to these clubs, or there'd be these parties at restaurants, and nothing to do with Edward because this is before I had met Edward, and the cigarette smoke. I've had migraine. I used to get migraine headaches, and I got them. God, I can't remember when I first started getting them. I was pretty young, probably mid-teens, and they were they were horrific pain. I mean, they were 8 hours of agony. Your head feel like it was being torn off. It was brutal, so bad that people used to go to the hospital and they would literally get shots of Demerol or morphine to ease the pain. There were people, and I hate to be graphic, but I want people to understand how terrible the pain was. People would commit suicide. Oh, I can't stand my migraines anymore. They were horrific, and my brother also got them. So anytime I'd go out to a club, it's like, oh, please don't let me get a headache, please. And also, any kind of alcohol could trigger it, so I never drank. I never liked the taste of alcohol anyway, but this is doubly why I never drank. So the first time I met Edward, he's smoking a cigarette, and I can remember during our conversation, the cigarette smoke and thinking, oh, please, please, please let me be okay. He comes over to the house sometime early 78, hard to remember. Oh, I'm sorry, late 78 is the first time. Um, and we've been communicating. We had phone calls. I may have been up to his house in Coldwater Canyon, which was just about 8 minutes away from where I lived in Laurel Canyon in the Hollywood Hills. And he was always smoking up at the studio, up at his place. And so he came over. He was going to play me um, the unreleased tracks for Van Halen 2. I thought, oh my God, this could be amazing. So he comes over, and he comes up the steps, and he's got a cigarette in his hand. And my first
oh
instinct
no.
was, oh my fucking God, what do I do? One, I was terrified I would get a headache. Two, the smell, oh my God, the smell would linger and linger because if you're not used to the smell and then the smell is there, you could really smell it for weeks and weeks. I was going to say, Edward, put out the cigarette. And I could have done that, and he would have completely understood. But it's like, yeah, I couldn't bring myself to do it. You don't tell Edward Van Halen to put out a cigarette. And I know I'm a hypocrite, to end all hypocrites. I couldn't do it. So he opened his door, and before he even comes in, he goes, hey, man, we need to go down to the car. He had just bought this garbage piece of crap car he was so proud of from money from selling the first record. And we go in, and there's a monster boombox, and he rolls up the windows, and he's smoking, and the interior of the car is filling with cigarette smoke, and I go, oh my God, what are we doing? And he plays me all these tracks. I think it was just maybe guitar and drums. I know there were no vocals, maybe bass. And I'm listening, thinking, oh my God, listen to that. At the same time, it's like the smoke is burning my eyes and it's filling my lungs. And he's smoking one after the other. The ashtray's overflowing. It's like, oh my God. So it was terrible. Then we get done, finally get out and I can breathe some fresh air. And we go into the house. And again, I was going to say, Edward, please don't smoke in the house, which I didn't. So he comes in and he smokes, 100 cigarettes. And it was terrible. But in all the times I was around him when he was smoking, and that was 100%, I was never around him when he wasn't smoking, which was horrible and terrible. And I knew, and I write about it in the book, um, um, that cigarettes are they're gonna kill a guy. The drinking won't kill him, and the drugs won't kill him. That won't help, but the cigarettes will kill him. And they did. They did. He developed cancer of the tongue, and that led to other complications. But in all the time I was with him, I never got a headache. And I don't know how that ever happened, but that was terrible. I hated seeing that. And every picture you've ever seen, he's got a cigarette. And in the cover of my first book, a photo by my very good friend and Van Halen photographer Niels Lozauer. This amazing picture of Edward, and the cigarette is jutting out of his guitar strings, which he'd always do. He'd always jam them between the strings up the neck. I had that. I had the cigarette airbrushed out. I didn't want it on the cover. There's a photo inside. I think he's sitting on a chair and he's got a cigarette, and I left that one in, I think. But I didn't want that cigarette on the cover. I just didn't want it. So anyway, yeah, that was a horrible addiction he had. But yeah, I never got a migraine being around Edward's cigarettes. So how that happened, I do not know.
I used to go around my friends when we were playing Xbox, and I would open the windows when there was smoke. I also struggle very much with smoke, and I'm so glad that it's been banned from public places.
Yeah, unbelievable. Yeah, so Edward ultimately was able to go to vaping, which arguably, again, I don't know. They say his vaping is actually worse than cigarette smoking. But again, it's very telling. He was able to stop the drugs and the drinking, but could not stop the smoking. It's horrible. It's horrible.